Hello, this is Cindy Kelly from Houston Enzymes. The topic today is the role of enzymes in autism, food intolerances, and gut issues, presented by Dr. Devin Houston. Welcome, Dr. Houston.
Good morning, Cindy. How are you?
I'm great. Good to hear you. And you may go ahead.
Okay, very good. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning in and letting me onto your computer for the next hour or so. Um, the nice thing about webinars is we can kind of keep this kind of loose and informal. And for those of you who may have heard me speak at some of the autism conferences we attend, this will be very similar, but the nice thing is I'm not constrained by time issues or the fact that there may be a speaker behind me wanting to present as well. So this gives me a little more time to go in depth, meander a little bit, tell old stories if they crop up, and try to keep you entertained for a while. But realize you guys are busy as well, so we'll get to the good stuff. And just remember, you can type in a question in the question box. And or if you have Cindy's email address, you could send it to her and she can check her email as well. Okay, this slide, what you should be seeing is a picture in the upper left-hand corner of a little girl, obviously in distress. She's holding her tummy, she's grimacing, and I know many parents who deal with autism see this a lot because for some reason in autism, the gut is one of the major organ systems affected. So this can be very, very disturbing to parents, especially when the child is nonverbal and they can't communicate exactly what's going on or where it hurts or why it's hurting. So we can only assume that a lot of this has to do with diet. And while we want our kids to eat good food, veggies, bell peppers, squash, apples, and such. But even these things can sometimes be problematic as well. And I'm sure many of you who have been battling autism and other developmental disorders have found that diet and the food we eat can play a large role in how autism manifests itself. As a result, there have been many different diets come along down the road. And we're going to mention some of those, and we're going to see how enzymes fit in there as well. But the whole plan is, the whole reason we do all this is to get a child like this little boy in the lower right-hand corner, smiling, happy, making eye contact, and basically interacting. So that's what the goal that we're trying to achieve. Now we're going to be talking a lot about food intolerances, and there's many different types. For example, there's the one you're going to hear the most of is casein and gluten intolerance, and that's where dairy products and wheat products cause problems when ingested. So we're going to be talking the majority about that, but there's also other intolerances such as difficulty in metabolizing carbohydrates and simple sugars, or there's malabsorption issues as well, where maybe the food is being broken down, but a lot of it's not being absorbed, or a lot of it's just being eliminated through the body as waste. There's also issues with salicylates and phenolic foods, and these are compounds that we see more often in fruits and vegetables, especially the brightly colored ones. And often these compounds, especially phenolic compounds, these are actually good compounds. These are the antioxidants and the anti-carcinogens, the things that it's the reason why we eat fruits and vegetables. We want to get those types of food into our system so we can drive these polyphenolic compounds. But even in a subset of some people, this can be problematic as well. During the presentation, I may use the terms food intolerance and allergy. And often we use those interchangeably. But in reality, there are differences between the terms. An allergy is basically something that occurs very quickly with even a small amount of food. This is and it occurs every time. It involves the immune system and histamine release. So this is what happens when you have a peanut allergy. The throat tightens up, it gets hard to breathe, it's life-threatening. You grab the EpiPen and hope for the best. And so those are things that um, denote allergies, and that is something that enzymes or any other supplement really can't address. So we want to make that very clear. So what we are going to be talking about mostly are what we refer to as food intolerances. And these are usually dose related, meaning you may be able to tolerate small amounts of the food, but when large amounts are eaten, then you start seeing the problems. And these are often due because the body reacts to a certain protein. Usually it's a protein in the food. For example, in dairy, it would be the protein casein. In wheat, it would be the protein gluten. The symptoms that you find with food intolerances usually involve the digestive system. You don't see the breathing problems or the low blood pressure or the massive histamine release that you would see in a true allergic reaction. And many more people have food intolerances than allergies. So it's much more common to have a food intolerance than an outright allergy. Now, what causes food intolerances? Sometimes it is the absence of an enzyme needed to digest food. For example, as we get older, we lose the ability to break down the milk sugar, lactose, into glucose and galactose. So that is one enzyme it's actually programmed that at the age of 5 or 6, we start decreasing the production of that particular enzyme, mostly because we've evolved into such that we don't need milk products after that age, and we start eating other types of foods. So in the enzyme business, you hear this quite a bit, that enzyme supplements to are needed because they're to replace enzymes that become deficient as we age. And some of that's partly true, but really the only enzyme that really decreases as we get older is lactase, and it's very easy to replace that enzyme. And we're going to talk about this idea a little bit more because there's a lot of misinformation on that particular subject. But continuing on with what causes food intolerance, sometimes it's something such as irritable bowel syndrome, where something causes an irritation, or food gets in the little crevices and causes some inflammation, and the bowel learns to react to that food. Sometimes it's outright food poisoning, bad scallops, or something left out too long, and you get a bad case of E. coli or salmonella poisoning. Um, it could be sensitivity to food additives, colors, artificial sweeteners, and such. That may be the problem. There could be an emotional component to food intolerance as well. There may be a stress or psychological factor associated with eating a particular food. And so that is one reason. Another is maybe you have a particular disease process, such as celiac disease, or what's more commonly being found now is non-celiac intolerance, where really to be diagnosed as positively for celiac disease, you have to have 3 types of tests and turn out positive on all 3 tests. Some of us just may have one, or may test positive for 1 or 2 of those. And so we do have some type of intolerance, but it's not outright celiac disease. So this is what we refer to as non-celiac intolerance. Now, the majority of intolerances that get the most publicity are things such as wheat. When we're talking about gluten intolerance, the gluten-free food industry has really bloomed in the last few years. It's very popular. It's you could almost call it a fad now. It's very popular and fashionable to mention that, oh yes, I'm on the gluten-free diet. But there's also other foods as well. We mentioned dairy. Casein can be a problem as well. And sometimes you have to determine whether this intolerance is just outright lactose intolerance, or maybe it's an intolerance to the dairy protein, the major protein, which would be casein. But other proteins such as soy can be problematic as well. Um, and then what we mentioned before, the polyphenolics, which are found in vegetables like strawberries, blueberries, blackberries. Usually the more highly colored the fruit or vegetable is, the higher the concentration of polyphenols. And while many people can eat these foods just fine, there's many others who find problems with those foods. So in some of these foods, like wheat, dairy, and soy, it's the peptides that are formed during normal digestion as the body attempts to break down the large proteins into smaller proteins called peptides. These peptides have some kind of activity and can perform some kind of work within our gut and sometimes in the whole body. With polyphenols, it's a little bit different. It's really not a protein or peptide problem. It's just that when polyphenols are formed in the food, there is what we call a post-translational modification, which in this case is just the attachment of a sugar group during in the plant. So what's supposed to happen is we eat that food or that fruit or vegetable, and we're supposed to have an enzyme that removes that sugar group. And that actually converts the polyphenol from an inactive form, or I'm sorry, from a form that we can't absorb to one that we can absorb. So the glycone form, or the form that does have the sugar group, is the one we can't absorb. It's something about that large sugar group being attached to it makes it difficult for our bodies to assimilate or absorb it. So we're supposed to have an enzyme in there that cleaves off that sugar group, which converts that polyphenol to the aglycone, which means without sugar. So it's the removal of a sugar group. But if you can't remove that sugar group, and as you continue eating and eating more of these foods, sometimes they will um, accumulate in the gut. And my theory is, and other people's theory is, that that's what we see is a small amount of histamine release. And that may be why we see the red cheeks, the red ears, the flushing effect. This can be seen not just in children on the spectrum, but in adults as well. Certain wines or certain beers, certain foods like cheese can be problematic as well, and you'll see that. And it's really not dangerous. It's sort of a social stigma. None of us like to look like we're embarrassed just because we had a glass of wine, but that often is what happens. So the thing I want to point out is that there's two ways to go about handling a food intolerance. You can avoid the food that's causing the problem, or you can use an appropriate enzyme that will address that particular food issue. And so that's going to be the main focus of this presentation. Now, we shouldn't put all the blame on proteins and polyphenols as well. There's obviously some of us who are intolerant to starches and sugars. In dairy is one of those foods that has proteins, carbs, and fats. So any of those three could be problematic. But let's talk about the sugars. And the main milk sugar in dairy is lactose. And so as I mentioned before, as we get older, our body does produce less lactase, but we often continue to eat dairy products, cheeses, other dairy products. Sometimes things like yogurt, we find that we can eat without any problems, even though we're lactose intolerant. Well, that's because the bacteria in the yogurt, they produce a lactase enzyme, which converts the lactose into the glucose and galactose. So they do the job for us. But with any other milk product, and a lot of adults like me, which I am definitely lactose intolerant. And the thought of drinking a glass of milk really literally turns my stomach. But I do like cheese. So, while we avoid milk and that's product, except on my cereal, there are other dairy products that we want to be able to consume without having the problems related to lactose intolerance. Other autism diets. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything there. We're gonna be mentioning these. The gluten-free, casein-free diet, GFCF, is probably the most popular diet or the most well-known diet, and that's the elimination of wheat and dairy from the child's diet. And this diet has been around for 20 years or so, and it can be the results from this can be amazing. And I will say for the record that if you can do the diet, we think it's useful. It's something that we do recommend if you can, but it is hard. In the Western diet that most Americans consume, gluten is is abundant, and it's supposed to be listed. Usually it is, but sometimes you don't know. If you go out to eat, there's really no guarantee that, well, they may not add gluten to your meal. It may have been cooked in a pan that previously had gluten. So there's all sorts of problems associated with trying to stay gluten-free and casein-free. The specific carbohydrate diet, or SCD diet, came around in the late 90s. Basically, uh, this was supposed to help those who were found to be have problems trying to break down certain types of carbohydrates. And we won't get too technical in it, but by avoiding those specific carbohydrates, we found better gut environments, more regular bowel movements, and in a lot of the kids on the spectrum, we found improvements as well. Other diets I'll just mention, and anyone can research these on the internet and find more information. But there's a Feingold diet, which tries to eliminate salicylates, which are similar to but slightly different from the phenolic issue. While most polyphenolics are good for you, a lot of the salicylates really are something that you want to try to avoid, and they can be bothersome to certain children. The low oxalate diet, this is a diet where you try to avoid eating things like broccoli, cabbage, the greens. Avoid the greens. Those people who have kidney stones are often advised to go on a low oxalate diet. Many type 2 diabetics are also advised to decrease their intake of oxalates. Now, this kind of goes against common sense because a lot of doctors want us to consume things like broccoli, cabbage, lettuce, get more greens in our diet, not just for the fiber, but there are some compounds, sulfur compounds that are good for us as well. But you have to weigh the advantages of not taking those, of avoiding those foods versus the nutritional benefit. And just one other mention, the GAPS diet, or the gut and psychology syndrome diet, is also revolves around avoiding those foods that tend to cause problems. And in autism, they manifest themselves through different behaviors and such. So those are things that you might want to look up on your own and check out. But we're going to be mainly concentrating on diets such as a gluten-free diet and the specific carbohydrate diet, because those are what enzymes can really complement or help with the most. Now, on the GFCF diet, which I'm sure many of you are probably already familiar, um, why avoid gluten? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, gluten is a very difficult protein for us to break down. We don't have all the enzymes, or we don't produce all the enzymes necessary in our gut to completely break it down. So what happens is we end up with partially broken down gluten or peptides, and there's several different types of these. For those who have celiac disease, there are the gliadins and glutenins, which are within a family called the prolamins. And these are peptides that are associated with celiac disease and cause specific problems within the gut. They're very damaging if you have celiac disease, and they actually cause inflammation. Again, it's a complicated process, but the gliadin binds with a particular antibody, which then promotes the production of another antibody, and you basically just have chaos and destruction within the gut. So celiacs, this is the reason why they avoid uh, gluten. Now, another type of peptide derived from gluten are what we refer to as the glutamorphins. And these are opiate-like peptides. They actually bind to the opiate receptor and they produce opiate-like effects. So they're like morphine or heroin. And there are several papers out there in the literature, one by Severance and people in his lab, which shows that the glutamorphins have potential neurotropic effects, which can manifest themselves not only neurologically, but also may affect the immune response as well. So this has become a very interesting area of research. And these are the peptides that seem to be more prevalent with children on the spectrum. And so this is the one that we're going to be concentrating with as dealing with the most. Again, casein, the major protein in dairy, uh, also produces a peptide very similar to the glutamorphin. It's called casomorphin. And here's the amino acid structure of it. Um, and it's very similar. It's an opiate peptide as well and produces a lot of the same effects as the glutamorphin. Now that for a long time, it was just GFCF, gluten and casein free. But the thing is, this sequence of amino acids that we call casomorphin, and it's very similar to glutamorphin, can be found in a number of other proteins. And just a few years ago, since when we started getting stories about children reacting very similarly to soy as they did on gluten and casein, it was discovered that soy protein can also produce an opiate peptide, which we aptly named soymorphin. And here's its structure. You can see it's very similar. It's not as long, but it has this initial structure. So it's very similar. And this is the pattern of where you have these proline groups alternating through the structure. And it's also, you see those in the prolamins and the gliadins as well. So proline containing peptides are very uh, problematic. They're very those. It's the fact that the proline is there that makes it hard to break them down any further. Now, my one problem with extolling the GFCF diet is that these are the proteins we know and can avoid, but there are literally thousands of proteins out there in other foods, and it's very likely that this particular pattern can be found in other foods. So we just may not know about them yet. So the thing I want to emphasize is while the diet is good, it only works on those foods that we know about that cause problems. And then I'll jump to the bottom line is that the particular set of enzymes that address these proteins really don't care what fruit it's found or comes from. It's going to help break these proteins down regardless of their source. So that's sort of the other thing. Well, here's another one. This one we found out just a couple of years ago that spinach leaves contain a peptide called riboscolan, and it's another opiate-like peptide. And again, it has this tyrosine proline structure that seems to be predominant in this. So I would imagine that we're going to find many other foods that have proteins that produce these kind of peptides as well. So what about enzyme supplements? I'm definitely biased, of course, since I've been using enzymes and I've studied enzymes for 30 years now. I formulate enzyme products. I'm a believer. I take them myself. So I do have some bias, but my bias is based on quite a bit of evidence. What I tell people and doctors is that enzyme supplements can be a very good complement to diets. The problem with the diets is compliance. The gluten-free, casein-free diet, for example, it's very restrictive. Those two food groups, wheat and dairy, comprise a very large amount of our Western diet. You take those out of the equation, and sometimes it's very difficult to find foods to give our kids, much less get them to eat it. So sometimes, being the pragmatist that I am, it's better to find something that works around the diet. So if you can, like I say, if you can do the diet and you can do it without problems, then definitely keep doing it. But there's many other families that have, that for some reason or another, they either can't or won't do the diet, or their child just won't succumb to the diet. So, but all hope is not lost. We have the particular enzyme products that will help break down those proteins. And the big reason is a lot of people who aren't really knowledgeable about how these enzymes work, they think it's because we're deficient in particular enzymes. It's not that we're deficient, it's just that the enzyme supplements are acid stable so that they can work in the stomach, which we can start the digestive process earlier. And I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit later on because it's very important, but keep this in mind. And just a heads up, most of the digestive process does not occur in the stomach. It starts in the small intestine. A lot of people think stomach acid works to digest food. It doesn't. There's just not, the stomach basically is a holding place. It's a reservoir. It mechanically breaks down food into a certain consistency that's acceptable to enter the gut. And that's basically it. As far as pure digestion, no, that comes later. But we're going to show how enzymes can work in the stomach, and they can kickstart the whole digestive process much sooner, and why that allows enzymes to be beneficial. And the main thing to keep in mind is that enzymes can often achieve the same goals as the diets with less cost, more convenience, and with faster results. Now, many who know my history, years and years ago, we butted heads with the GFC diet group for a while because they thought we were trying to replace the diet. No, we're just trying to get kids to be better and to be healthier. So if they can't do the diet, then the diet is worthless for them. So we have another way to do it, using the enzymes. But the thing is that even those who were doing the GFCF diet, when they added enzymes, and these were people that swear they were 100% GFCF, which in my mind it's not possible, but that's another story. Those who were on the diet and added enzymes to it, they found another level of improvement when they used the enzymes. So that tells me a couple things. That, coupled with the fact that people who didn't do the diet and used enzymes saw improvement, indicates that the enzymes were working in a very similar manner that the diet was working at. Now, this just kind of shows, using proteins as a model, what goes on when we're talking about digestion. Digestion is nothing more than the breakdown of large, complex compounds, in this case large proteins, to smaller compounds, such as first peptides, which still have amino acids linked. So these are just smaller proteins. There's enzymes that break down the large proteins to peptides. And then there are enzymes that break down the peptides to amino acids. And this is what the gut absorbs. This is what the gut wants, and this is supposed to be the end result of digestion. We want to have free amino acids that the body can absorb from the gut, because the body has its own proteins it wants to build. That you can't eat a particular protein and have it go to the place that the body needs it to. So all this is just raw material for the GI system to deconstruct into raw material, or the starting blocks to make our own proteins. And the same way with starches and carbohydrates. We have these large complex carbohydrates, which are just like proteins have amino acids linked together, carbohydrates are basically sugars linked together. So we have enzymes that break these down into trisaccharides and disaccharides, or basically sugar groups that two or three sugar groups linked together. And we have other enzymes that then break these down into individual glucose units. The body uses a lot of glucose, so it has many, many pathways for converting material to glucose. The brain uses glucose, that's the only fuel it can use. So the body even has pathways for converting protein into glucose. So we can make glucose from a number of different starting materials. Fats. There is a role for fats. Everybody hears about triglycerides. They get a bad rap because we want to keep our triglyceride levels down. We need some of them. We need a little bit. This is the structure of triglyceride. It's a glycerol. This is a glycerol, what we call a glycerol backbone, and it has three positions. And at each position is attached a long chain fatty acid. And what the body wants to do is to clip these fatty acids off the glycerol backbone. And once we do that, we have these free fatty acids. Well, the body can then convert those into short chain fatty acids, which are good. The body wants those. We can derive a number of compounds, beneficial compounds from short chain fatty acids. So we require a lipase enzyme. Now, there are different lipase enzymes. Each position requires a particular lipase. So often good in a lipase enzyme supplement not to rely on just one type of lipase. So a multi-lipase component can ensure that we're completely clipping off all these fatty acids off the glycerol. The body can even use the glycerol. So everything gets reused and recycled. Now, digestive enzymes. What they do is what we've demonstrated here. They break down whole foods into a form that can be absorbed from the gut into the body, into the cells, and used for whatever purpose the body needs. The body produces actually an abundance of enzymes. You can find enzymes in the saliva. There's a couple in the stomach. The majority of digestive enzymes are produced by the pancreas, and which then are moved into the intestinal tract where it does the bulk of the digestive work. Also, the probiotic bacteria in the colon also produce enzymes as well. They do sort of the finishing work, large downstream part of the colon. Both pancreatic and plate-based enzymes are available in oral form. A lot of doctors will prescribe Creon, Biocase, or pancreatin as a form of pancreatic enzymes if they feel that additional help is needed for fat digestion or breakdown. Pancreatic enzymes supplements, or they are available by prescription only. They're derived from cow or pig pancreas, so it's basically it's a pancreas extract that are standardized at a certain level of protease, amylase, and lipase enzyme. And pancreatic enzymes are very strong. They're very potent, but they are not acid stable. In fact, to take it orally, it has to be treated, or what we call enteric coated, to protect the enzyme from the stomach acid and the low pH. And once it moves into the neutral pH of the gut, then the pancreatic enzyme can work. Plant-based enzymes, however, which are available in oral form, don't need to be treated because they work under a broad pH range, anywhere from pH 2 to 8 or 9. They will work in that range. So these are excellent enzymes to start the digestive process early within the stomach, kickstart digestive, break down certain problem foods in what I call the safe area of the stomach, because not a whole lot of stuff gets absorbed from the stomach, especially proteins and peptides. So we can defuse a lot of problematic proteins while it's sitting in the stomach if we take and use these acid stable enzymes. And we will get more into that, and it's very important. That's sort of the whole um, logistics for taking enzyme supplements. And I should have tapped on that sooner. But this is the reason: acid stability. They work in the stomach as well as the GI tract. So actually, they start working in the stomach and continue working um, throughout their uh, time in the GI tract. The plant-based enzymes are very hardy. They can withstand higher temperatures. They are not broken down by our own enzymes, not very easily. They are eventually way down in the gut, but they're extremely hardy proteins. So they can do a lot of work, and it doesn't take a whole lot to do that amount of work. Now, how does taking supplemental enzymes help? And this is where there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of medical doctors will tell you, and they're right, that your pancreas produces more than enough enzymes to break down food. And I agree with that. That's true. The thing is, taking additional enzyme supplements, these are enzymes that work and act slightly different than the enzymes you have in your gut. So one of the things to do is they break down the proteins differently, which ends up being that the protein is digested more thoroughly. So we're going to prevent the production. I'm going to show how we're going to prevent the production of the opiate-like peptides, the casomorphin and glutamorphin, as well as other peptides. But to do this, we need to know exactly what type of protease and peptidase enzyme to work. You have to use combination of multiple enzymes in a certain combination. And they must be the acid stable plant-based enzymes. Pancreatic enzymes will not work for this. So because we want to do this in the stomach where no peptide absorption occurs. So that takes care of proteins, but also enzymes help break down starches. Again, they can do this in the stomach, help prevent gas and bloating. Anyone who's read Dr. Tim Bowie's papers, one of the things that he showed is that many children on the spectrum who had gut injury or inflammation in the gut were slightly deficient in certain disaccharidase enzymes, the enzymes that do the finishing work from the small, converting the complex carbs to sugars. So enzymes like lactase, sucrase, maltase, those type of things are sometimes deficient in these kids. We're not saying that all of them are, but there seem to be a higher number of kids who are on the spectrum that were slightly deficient in these enzymes. So what happens then if you're not breaking down starches and carbs and they're just laying around in the gut, they become a food source for bad bacteria. Well, for all the bacteria actually, but it can provide a source for bad bacteria. That's why you often see the gas and bloating. It's basically a fermentation occurring in the gut, and so we want to, for a couple reasons, keep starches broken down, and we want to keep the gut clear of undigested carbs and starches. One, we want to avoid the fermentation. We want to avoid the huge increase in gut bacteria, and a lot of those bacteria are gas producers. So they're the ones that especially when they're feeding vociferously, they're producing a lot of gas while they're feeding. There may be some evidence that starting the breakdown process on carbs and starches can result in a lower glycemic response. There were some early studies that showed a trend in instead of seeing a sharp spike in blood glucose and blood insulin levels when human volunteers took enzymes with their meal, they showed a more modulated response. It wasn't as spiky. It was a more rounded curve. And so that may be helpful as well, because that may be why a lot of people who use enzymes report that they don't feel as lethargic and tired after a meal. So a lot of the enzymes you take in supplement can be produced, are similar to the ones produced by probiotics. So instead of waiting for taking a probiotic, waiting for the bacteria to get down in the gut and start producing enzymes, you can just take the enzymes themselves and bypass the probiotic bacteria as well. And there's also evidence that enzymes can modify the polyphenolic compounds, enabling them to be absorbed better and avoid some of the problematic um, some of the problems seen, such as the red ears and the red cheeks, and behavioral problems that's often associated with those. Okay, I want to get back to the idea of the stomach as a safe place for foods. When you eat a meal, depending on how much you eat and what type of food you eat, the food's going to stay in the stomach for a good 2 to 5 hours. Again, it's very muscular organ. It's basically an agitator. It just tends to grind and break down mechanically the food that you eat. But as far as chemical breakdown, there's no whole lot going on. There is hydrochloric acid in the stomach, but it doesn't really break down foods. It does a couple of things. It keeps bacteria from the intestinal tract from getting into the stomach. The HCl also denatures proteins, which if any of you have put an egg white into vinegar or lemon juice, you see it go from from a clear uh, substance to a white substance, and you see little specks appear. Well, that's the egg white protein being denatured, and when it's denatured, it comes out of solution into a solid. But for the purpose of digestion, a protein that it's not denatured is basically like a ball of yarn. It's globular, and it's difficult for enzymes to get into the interior of that protein. If it's denatured, however, it's like taking that ball of yarn and unraveling it. It becomes linear, and it gives more access to the enzymes to break the peptide bonds and such. So that's what we mean by the fancy term of denaturation. The other thing that hydrochloric acid does is it converts the major enzyme in the stomach, pepsin, which is a protease, it converts it to an active form. As long as the stomach acid is under pH 5, pepsin will be activated. And pepsin does some work on the proteins in the stomach, but its main job is to work downstream. Once the food leaves the stomach, it activates or converts the inactive pancreatic enzymes to the active form. So, and I mention this because a lot of us are on what we call H2 blockers, or the stomach acid blockers like Prilosec, Prevacid, because we have heartburn or reflux. So the H2 blockers shut down acid production. And when you do that, you may be having less reflux, but you're also hindering digestive process because you have raised the pH in the stomach. Pepsin is no longer active, and it can't activate the digestive enzymes downstream as well. So I tell a lot of people who have problems with reflux and heartburn who are taking H2 blockers to add enzymes to their process, because these enzymes, the supplemental enzymes, don't really care what the pH is in the stomach. They're going to work regardless of the pH. So you get the best of both worlds if you're suffering from heartburn and reflux. You can take those drugs and you can take the enzymes, you can get less heartburn, and you're still working to break down the food. By taking the enzymes, supplemental enzymes, you're you're getting a 2 to 5 hour head start on food breakdown by having these enzymes present. You're also defusing those proteins, and we'll emphasize that more. Wheat gluten, casein, soy, those proteins that are present, they can't be absorbed from the stomach. So you have a window of opportunity here. If your child is sensitive to those proteins or any other protein, and you're trying to avoid giving those to him, but he gets it anyway, then you have a chance to basically defuse the bomb by adding the appropriate enzymes to break down those proteins while it's still here in the stomach. The only thing that's absorbed in the stomach really is water, glucose, alcohol, some B vitamins. Not a whole lot else gets absorbed. If you eat a high fat meal, you're actually cause the stomach to not empty as quickly. So that's why a high fat meal, if you suffer from reflux or heartburn, will actually cause it to be worse because the food is staying in the stomach for a longer period of time, and you increase the chances of reflux. So a high fat meal can be problematic as well. Again, a lipase, plant-based lipase product will work on those fats in the stomach while they're in the stomach and theoretically allow the stomach to empty quicker. So this idea of enzyme deficiency, again, I want to come back to this. You'll hear a lot of people, companies who sell enzymes, is that take enzyme supplements because you're eating cooked foods and those enzymes are gone, so you don't digest as well. Well, technically that's true, but I always counter with this, that the enzymes in raw foods, in every food has enzymes. Actually, everything that's was alive at one point has enzymes in them. Um, but the raw food advocates, when they start talking about enzymes, their thinking is a little bit off. Really, the enzymes in raw foods are only there. They're not there to help you. A plant or fruit or vegetable can't think. It's not thinking that, oh, I have enzymes inside me for you to eat to help your digestion. Those enzymes are there to help the fruit basically rot and break down so that the seeds that that plant produced in the fruit can be disseminated in nature. Anyone who's put a green banana on their kitchen table, you can see how the enzymes in that banana work. They convert, there's an amylase enzyme in banana. It converts the starchy, firm meat of the banana into a soft, sugary, um, sweet substance, and it goes from green to yellow to brown. But that doesn't occur in a matter of hours. It occurs over several days, and we don't have several days um, to digest our food. We must digest that in a matter of hours. So the raw food advocates, while their intentions are good, their thinking is a little bit off. Um, we're we're really not trying to make up a deficit of enzymes. And the other thing that rattles me is that they often say that we're born with a certain amount of enzyme and it gets used up during our lifetime and we have to replace that, or other enzymes in our body have to be converted to digestive enzymes, which is totally false. That just does not occur at all. We're not pre-programmed to produce a certain amount of enzymes. The pancreas is constantly producing digestive enzymes in an inactive form. It stores it in the pancreatic duct. As soon as the gut wall in the small intestine, the first part of the small intestine, the duodenum, when those cells detect a drop in the pH because of the acidic food from the stomach entering the GI tract, that triggers hormones to cause the pancreatic duct to contract, and that squirts the pancreatic enzymes as well as sodium bicarbonate, which raises the pH so that the pancreatic enzymes can work, onto the food or into the small intestine, and digestion starts occurring and absorption starts occurring as well. So that's why if your child has ingested wheat and dairy and they're sensitive to those proteins, then absorption can start occurring once the food moves out of the stomach. So if you took an enzyme prior to that, there's a good chance that there was plenty of time for that particular enzyme, protease enzyme, to work on the on the gluten, casein, or soy. And hopefully it would have prevented the production of those peptides. But this whole idea of an enzyme deficiency really doesn't work, except for the enzymes such as lactase, which that does thing, but that's a pre-programmed deficiency. So, but the whole idea of using supplements, you want to shift digestion from the gut to the stomach, a safer place to start breaking down foods that cause problems. The other thing about enzyme supplements, and I saw something on a TV show not long ago um, where they mentioned they weren't recommending enzyme supplements. They said they were not safe or could be dangerous, which could be further from the truth. Enzyme supplements are probably the safest supplement or of any supplement on the market. There have been studies uh, with humans taking large amounts of these enzymes over long periods of times. There's been no toxicity. There's a term called LD50, which is used for drugs and pharmaceuticals. It's basically that dose of that drug that kills 50% population of rats. There is no LD50 for any food enzyme, digestive enzymes. So uh, there's really no toxicity, no side effects produced at any level. So enzymes, while we kind of our customer base are those dealing with uh, autism and spectrum type disorders, enzymes can actually be beneficial to anyone. And I found this out myself 20 years ago when I started taking enzymes. And I am a born skeptic. I really didn't think that they would, but it was amazing how much better I felt um, taking enzymes. So it's something that's just um, not even a lot of medical doctors aren't aware of. I went to med school and there was only one lecture that I can recall that referred to enzymes of digestion. And so it wasn't, and I don't think it's improved much at all. So really there's no real understanding of supplemental enzymes by a lot of doctors. I know that because at conferences I have a lot of doctors talk to me and ask me to inform and educate them about enzymes. So it's there's no shame in admitting that what you don't know. There's lots of things I don't know, but one thing I do know is how enzymes work. So my job is to educate and inform, and to try to get rid of the myths and the misinformation on enzymes. Um, Basically, so that everyone can derive some benefit from the use of enzymes. Now, we can wrap this up in a little bit, but I'd like to go back and kind of reinforce some areas. And I'm going to give you a little biochemistry lesson here. One of the dogmas of biochemistry is that structure determines function, which actually is a common sense thing. Something that was designed as a toaster is going to work as a toaster. If it looks like a toaster and it toasts toast, then it's a toaster. Um, if something was designed and built as a car, it has a car-like structure, then it's going to function as a car. So how something is built, how it's constructed, determines what it does. So I like to use this analogy. Just think of letters, letters in the alphabet. We use those to make up words. Amino acids are used to make proteins. So amino acids are the letters that make up proteins, which could be construed as words. And just as words, a particular word is comprised of a certain sequence of letters that determines the meaning of that word, the function of a particular protein depends on which amino acids and the order or the sequence of those amino acids. And if you change the structure of something, you change the function. Same way with the protein. You change the structure of the protein, you change the function. And let's show this real quick. Okay, here's a word. most of us, I'm sure all of us, recognize. It's a sequence of the letters M-O-T-H-E-R. The words recognized as mother, and that depicts a certain visual image. The structure of this word, or the composition of this word, determines its meaning, in this case, mother. If we change that composition, say we take off two letters, we have the word moth, which is something totally different. So by changing the structure of the word, you change the meaning of the word. Same way with proteins. Um, in peptides, we have the exorphin peptides, opiate-like peptides, that if which, while they are in the gut and they're derived in the gut, and they are actually produced as normal part of digestion. That's why a lot of people swear a glass of warm milk in the evening helps them sleep. They're just basically getting a little bit of a morphine rush, a little bit of opiates. If gut inflammation is present, or what we call a leaky gut, and that's all a leaky gut is. Inflammation in any organ causes the gaps between cells to become larger, so things that would normally stay in the gut now can escape out of the gut and into the systemic circulation. So if these opiate-like peptides, which are in the gut, can escape, they can exert influence in other organ systems like the brain. So the casomorphin, the gliadomorphin, soy morphins, casein, gluten, and soy are all peptides that can exert effects depending on the integrity of the GI tract. They do produce opiate actions. That's been demonstrated very well. That's how they're characterized. Now, what can we do about it? And this, we're going to get into some of the specifics of particular enzymes and how they work. DPP4, I know many of you have heard about this enzyme. It refers to the particular enzyme dipeptidyl peptidase 4. This enzyme was actually discovered in the 80s, I believe. I came across it after I had developed after I developed an enzyme formula for a company that it was targeting those kids with autism. What I knew about the project at the time, and this was my intro to autism as well, but that there were these peptides that they kept talking to me about, casomorphin and glutamorphin, and that they were problematic. So it was after the fact, after I had developed that formula and that it had gotten out, and I heard all these great things that parents were observing in their kids who were taking it, it got me more interested in what actually was happening. So I went to the literature, and that's when I came across this DPP4, and it made me wonder, because enzyme supplements, these plant-based enzymes, while they are extremely purified from their source, there are other enzyme activities present, some that we know of and some that we don't know of. My thought was, is DPP4, could there be something like it in the enzymes we use in that particular product? Well, the answer was yeah. And what intrigued me about DPP4, I'm getting ahead of myself, is that in the literature, it's the only enzyme known to break down the exorphin peptides, such as casomorphin and glutamorphin. So it is present in the body, in the GI tract, which that caused a red light to go off in my head. If you have cellular damage in the gut or gut damage in those cells that produce DPP4, then maybe you don't have as much DPP4 as you should have. And we do know that kids on the spectrum tend to have gut inflammation. Now, this is what prompted me to look again after I had developed this formula. I went back and tested the enzymes we put in there and found that a couple of them had very high amounts of DPP4 activity. This was back in 1999. So there was an element of luck, basically, in the formulation of this product. So I didn't know about DPP4 until after we put the product together. And what made it really nice is it gave us a mechanism of action to explain the observations that we were seeing. So to me, as a scientist, this was very much appreciated. It gave us a story, but uh, when I told people about it, that there were things that they heard and things that they ignored. One of the things they ignored was this DPP4 is a very picky enzyme. It has certain rules it goes by for it to work, and we're going to demonstrate that. What makes it not really that great of an enzyme to put in a supplement or to rely upon it by itself. And I'm going to show you why. We're going to show, this is a normal digestion of the casein protein in the stomach and small intestine, or first part of the small intestine, duodenum. So this is a casein molecule from cow, bovine casein molecule. It's not the whole molecule, it's just a part that we're interested in. All these X's are amino acids that we're not interested in. But you see this. This is embedded within the casein molecule: tyrosine proline, phenylalanine proline, glutamine proline, isoleucine. This is, while it's in the casein molecule, you know, you can guess this is casomorphin. But when it's within a casein molecule, it's not casomorphin. Because it's casein. Again, structure determines function. So right now this structure is as a casein molecule. If casein stayed casein during the digestive process, these kids wouldn't be reacting to dairy products. Same thing with gluten. But it doesn't stay that way. What happens is, I mentioned the major enzyme in the stomach, pepsin. Well, this is one of the things it does. It will do a little bit of work on some proteins. Pepsin likes to, every protease, one thing about enzymes, they're very, very specific in what they do. Most enzymes do one thing. Pepsin is a protease enzyme, which means it works on proteins, and it just has a few peptide bonds, types of peptide bonds, or these linkages between amino acids that it works on. It so happens pepsin likes this bond between these two amino acids right here. So in the stomach, pepsin encounters the casein molecule, and it makes a fragment of the casein molecule. It clips those off. And so you don't really have casein anymore, you just have a fragment of the casein molecule. And this is all still in the stomach. Later on, a couple hours later, the food mass moves into the first part of the GI tract, the duodenum, where it encounters a pancreatic protease elastase. Again, elastase is different from pepsin, so it works on different peptide bonds. It happens to like to work on this type of peptide bond between the isoleucine and whatever this amino acid is. So what it does is clip there. Now we have produced casomorphin. And so it's the sequential action of two enzymes found in normal digestive process, pepsin and elastase, that produce the casein molecule, or the casomorphin molecule. So this is a peptide. It's incomplete digestion of a food protein, in this case casein, produce a bioactive opiate-like peptide. So that's what we have. And then this is normal digestion. This occurs in all of us. Now, and why it has its particular causes a specific certain effect in kids on the spectrum, we're not really sure of. I think it has to do with looking at the opiate receptor and how it works in these kids. But again, that's a different lecture. So let's go back to what DPP4 does. How does it exactly work on a exorphin peptide? Well, again, we'll go back to, this is the pattern of the exorphin peptides. Some amino acid proline, some amino acid proline ad infinitum. So you have proline at every other site within the peptide. DPP4, again, it has certain rules. It's very, very picky. Just has the just right scenario for it to work. One of the rules is this end of the protein has to be free. It can't be attached to anything. So this amino acid, it doesn't care what amino acid this is, but it has to be free. It can't be attached on this side. The other rule is that what's attached to this amino acid on the other side, or the next to the last amino acid, has to be a proline group. So, and DPP4 works, it removes amino acids in pairs, in groups of two. So it works like this. It clips that peptide bond right there. So you remove that. Now, let's go back to our dogma, our mantra that structure determines function. If this is a exorphin peptide and you just remove two amino acids, then it's something else. It's not an exorphin peptide anymore. But also look at what's left here. You have the exact same scenario that you had prior. So DPP4 sees that. Oh, wait, it says, oh, this amino acid is free. It's not connected. And the next amino acid is a proline group. I will just go ahead and clip that right there. So it removes another two amino acids. Now you really don't have casomorphin because you've really changed the structure. But look again, because proline is there at every other alternating amino acid, you have this kind of structure left. So it can do it one more time. Let's just clip right there. So you've basically just knocked the heck out of that peptide. You've completely just degraded it. And that's what digestion is. You want to break down proteins and peptides to their lowest common denominator. So this helps a lot. Now, there are other peptidase enzymes in the gut that'll break these down into individual amino acids. But see, that's a great story. But there's just these rules that DPP4 has to abide by. So let's see what happens if DPP4 is in the stomach. Okay, one thing you have here, you got your bovine casein molecule here. Now, based on the last slide, what we know is DPP4 would work there, except that this amino acid is not, it's blocked, it's attached. So it can't, DPP4 can't do a darn thing by itself in the stomach. So it really does no good until if we wait and let pepsin do its thing, it goes ahead, clips that peptide bond, it goes away. Now DPP4 says, oh, wait, that's not attached anymore. And there's a proline, the next last amino acid. I can do my thing. So, and this is, casomorphin has not even been formed yet because it's still attached to the rest of this casein fragment. So this is what I talk about defusing the bomb. You're going DPP4 just goes along and it continues on its merry way, just doing its thing because the proline, the scenario, the rules are still in place. Okay, this all happens in the stomach. No absorption. These can't be absorbed from the stomach. And again, casomorphin, this was before casomorphin was not even formed. So we defused the bomb before it blew. Now, but that required, again, certain things to happen. So you have to kind of assume that that's going to happen. Well, I don't, that's why I think DPP4 is a great enzyme. I think it's a very interesting enzyme. I'm not going to rely on it totally to protect a kid from the effects of gluten and casein. So a better way around that is to do this. Let's go back to our casein molecule. Let's use multiple proteases. Again, different proteases have different affinities for different peptide bonds that they like to work on. So let's say this protease 4.5, which is a different enzyme, different protease from DPP4. It's different from pepsin. It's different from elastase. It tends to like to break these kind of hydrophobic, what we call peptide bonds between hydrophobic amino acids. So this peptide bond is susceptible to this work. Again, we're just having, this is casein in the stomach. This is an acid-stable enzyme. 4.5 actually refers to its optimal pH activity. So this is a very acidic where it loves acid. It actually works better at lower pH. And it does this. Now this is even before no pepsin, no DPP4, but but what, well, let's just show that again. What happened where casomorphin would have been formed is now there's no way you can form casomorphin because you clip that you change that structure. You can't produce casomorphin out of that. There's another enzyme, protease 6.0. It works at a little bit higher. It works under at many different pHs, but its optimal activity is at 6.0. Enzymes work like a bell curve. So at 6.0, that's where it's optimal. It's 4.5, it's optimal, but it works at pHs on either side of that. It's not an all or nothing thing. This particular protease likes to break this peptide bond. Again, right where casomorphin would have been formed, but you can't produce casomorphin now. Again, DPP4 is not even in the picture. Neither is pepsin. You don't have to wait on something to happen. These all work in the stomach. So here's the bottom line. To cover all the bases and to ensure success, let's use multiple proteases to ensure that we're completely breaking down a food protein. So relying on DPP4 alone is really, in my book, not sufficient. Those companies that tout DPP4, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but again, it has some very strict set of rules to work by. If you add other proteases that have different peptide bond preferences, you can get around whether DPP4 is there or not. I mean, it's good. By combining all three of these, you're basically just hedging your bets a little bit more. There are a couple of universities that have looked at this, and they're using very similar enzymes that are found in supplements in what they call an enzyme cocktail. They are actually fast-tracking this through FDA as a possible treatment for celiac disease. So to me, this is extremely exciting. It means that at some point down the road, there may be, and if for those people who have celiac disease, they can go to their doctor. The doctor can prescribe this enzyme, and they will be able to not worry about gluten as much. So that's down the road. That's not saying that enzyme supplements are good for celiac people, but the pattern is there. They're working on the same principle that we've worked on, basically validating what we've been saying, that the use of multiple proteases, looking at breaking down, in this case, not gliadin, but glutamorphins, is an appropriate way to address a particular food intolerance. So that's all well and good for proteins. Let's quickly go to the carbohydrates enzymes. Same thing. Again, Dr. Tim Bowie's papers show that some children with autism may be low in disaccharidase enzyme. So this may be an actual enzyme deficiency because these enzymes, which are produced by cells in the gut, if they have gut damage, those cells that produce those enzymes may be gone. So these kids have more gut problems. They have more yeast and dysbiosis because the undigested carbs, we always hear that sugars, don't give a kid sugars because the bad bugs feed on sugar. Well, sugar is actually, glucose is actually absorbed out of the gut quite quickly. It's the carbohydrates, though, that are what bacteria and yeast feed on more so than sugar. So if you can break down the carbs to simple sugars, you get rid of both. So the loose stools and the gas and bloating occurs when you're not breaking down starches sufficiently. So you want to look for enzymes such as amylase, glucoamylase, lactase, transglucosidase type of enzymes to help with carbohydrate digestion. The enzymes for polyphenolic foods, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just get to the basics. Highly colored fruits and veggies, good nutrition, but often not tolerated by some. It's like putting a lot of roughage. I've experienced myself. Eating raw veggies is hard on my GI tract. I don't necessarily have low tone, but it's just I just get very rumbly, and it's just often a little bit painful. Maybe if I chewed my food a little bit better and I try to slow down, but still, um, raw fruits and vegetables often cause these problems. Using enzymes like xylanase or cellulase or glucanase can help break down the fiber in the raw vegetables, the carrots, the peppers and stuff, and just kind of the make it less stressful on the gut to digest these foods. And again, I mentioned the flushing effect. This is the xylanase enzyme that seems to be effective in eliminating the red ears and red cheeks. So uh, whether it's adults or kids. Some practical tips for using enzymes. Again, most of the questions we get are related to dosing. Um, again, the no toxicity, there's a high degree of safety in it, so we always encourage experimentations. Everyone's different, their diets are different, the foods they eat are different, so one person may need a particular set of enzymes, another person may need a totally different set of enzymes. So we do encourage experimentation. We try to give you as much information as possible to make a good choice, but um, try different amounts of enzymes. Start with a low amount and work up. Just so you're not wasting the enzymes or spending more money than you need to. Try taking enzymes at the beginning of a meal. Again, these enzymes work in the stomach, so the sooner you take the enzyme towards the beginning of the meal, the more time you're giving the enzymes to work on the food in the stomach. You don't have to worry about body weight or age. You dose on the more you eat, the more enzyme you may need because you're working on within a certain amount of time. So if you eat a lot of food, you may need more enzyme to break down the food within that same amount of time. Most medications don't interfere or aren't bothered by enzymes or other supplements. The exception being that the cellulase enzymes may be a problem with some of the older over-the-counter medications that use methylcellulose for time release effects. So if you're using a time release medication like Mucinex, um, you might want to avoid taking a cellulase enzyme along with it because it'll break down the cellulose and release more drug quicker. With most prescription drugs, more modern type of drugs that are time release, they use other non-cellulose methods to do that. But if you look on the inactive ingredients, if you see things like hypermellose, methylcellulose, those type of things, and it's a time release agent, then just don't take the enzyme, a cellulase enzyme along with it. All the other enzymes are okay, but cellulase enzyme breaks down cellulose. So just keep that in mind. Enzymes should work with the first meal you take it with, so it doesn't have to build up any certain amount in your stomach. In fact, they don't. They stay in the gut and they're eliminated. They stay with the food that you eat. So the enzyme you took at breakfast isn't going to be around to help with lunch. So that's why we encourage you to try to take it with each meal, or at least 2 meals a day. Quickly, a summary. These enzymes work in the stomach and GI tract. You start digestion earlier. Enzymes can address foods that are missed by diets, as well as increase diet effectiveness. So again, the enzymes, protease enzymes don't care whether it's gluten, casein, soy. If it's a protein and it's a protease enzyme, it's going to break it down, more so than if you didn't take it. So, and if there are some proteins that we don't know about that are causing problems, same thing. The protease enzyme should take care of it. The anecdotal improvements that you see with diets and enzymes indicate that the mechanism of action is similar, that it's basically addressing the opiate peptides, the glutamorphin and the casomorphin. One, you're just avoiding the production of it. Two, the enzymes are breaking down those proteins so you don't produce the peptides. And based on the known actions of acid-stable enzymes in mainstream studies, other food intolerances may be targets for enzyme therapy as well. Um, some doctors may say enzymes can't replace diets, um, but we're but in actuality they can. Okay, we know that because many of our customers have been able to do that. Again, we think the diet is great. We recommend it, but we also know that um, life presents some challenges, and sometimes, for whatever reason, if a family can or won't do the diet, we're saying there's a way around that. Enzymes can often help and be just as good, if not better, than the diet. Enzymes should only be taken for infractions. That doesn't make sense. If they work for infractions, then they will work all the time. So that just doesn't make sense. One doctor came and said, oh, plant enzymes are too powerful. They're dangerous. I don't know where he got that information. They are actually less as far as compliance. When you're talking about power with an enzyme, that's really not the proper word. But if you're talking about strength, the pancreatic enzymes are much stronger than the plant enzymes. But again, it's not a matter of the strength of the enzyme, it's where you're using the enzyme. Enzymes are catalysts, which means they work and they aren't used up during the process. They do work, but they are not destroyed during the work process. So theoretically, one molecule of enzyme can do an infinite amount of work given an infinite amount of time. So again, it's where you're placing those enzymes. And what our argument is that by taking enzyme supplements, you're shifting the digestive process more toward the stomach, a safe area to break down these problem foods. So anyway, take-home message. Current research provides good evidence for enzymes as modifiers of problem foods. Stay on the diet if you can, but know that at some point, and we think soon, enzymes may replace diets for not just intolerances, but as disease treatment. And again, our disclaimer is that enzymes are not can't prevent, treat, diagnose any kind of disease process. Just keep an eye on future developments as they come out. Okay. One quick thing. When you're looking at enzyme products, look at the supplement facts box. This is important because what you put in here in a product has to be true, or you can get into a lot of trouble. Some enzyme products you just see what we call mass units, milligram amounts, no activity units. And that means that there's no guarantee of activity. What I notice here, serving size, 3 capsules. Well, that's a lot of capsules. And the serving size refers to these, whatever's listed below. So 3 capsules, you have to take 3 capsules to get this. An enzyme blend, what we call it, a super duper enzyme blend, which means they put a blend of enzymes together, but they're not telling you what's in the blend. It's a proprietary enzyme blend. Then they list the enzymes, but there's no activity. These could be inactive enzymes. All they're guaranteeing is that there's this amount of enzyme in 3 capsules. So this is not a very good product. Avoid this at all costs. Milligram units are useless for enzymes. It really doesn't tell you anything. You can have a proprietary blend, but make sure that indented underneath it, it's a listing of what's in the blend. Now this is a better product. One, you have a more concentrated product. 1 capsule contains this amount. And you may not understand what these are, what these refer to, but it does mean that they were assayed for activity. So if a company puts this on their label in the supplement facts box, it darn well better, if it's tested, it should test for that, or it's an adulterated product. So anyway, so this is what you want to look for. Something that says, guarantees you that that these are active enzymes. Otherwise, there's no guarantees. This is my contact info. You can go to our website and get more information as well. And with that, I thank you, and I will turn it over to Cindy to ask some questions. Or
And
you
you can,
submitted some questions ahead of time, so
yes, and you can keep your screen up for the contact info. Can you hear me okay?
okay. Yes.
All right. We had a few questions sent in ahead of time, and then I have more that people have sent us here at the end of the presentation, so I'll go through some of those. The first one, Dr. Houston, my son doesn't always chew his food completely. Could this cause food intolerance?
Well, it may not be an intolerance per se, but not chewing food is problematic. The enzymes like the food to be broken down mechanically to the consistency of like soup. Um, you're basically increasing the amount of surface area present so that the enzymes can get into it. It's like, oh, if you have a clump of mashed potatoes and you have a lump in there, well, it's hard for the enzyme to work on what's inside the lump. But if it's all kind of a consistent soft mush, then you're letting the enzymes get uh, have access to the entire amount of food. So chewing does a couple things. One, the more we chew, you're also mixing the enzymes that are in saliva. You're mixing that into the food as well. So you're starting the digestive process even sooner than getting in the stomach. You're starting it while it's still in the mouth. So especially starches. There's an amylase enzyme in saliva that will help break down carbs to sugar, and so that's helpful too. So chewing is good. Um, but yeah, I think you'll get more benefit out of the enzymes if you can get a kid to chew or at least mash his food up for him a little bit better. So if he's a wolfs it down, which is a male kind of thing anyway to do, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure how you get them to chew better, but if you can get them to slow down, it's just better all the way around.
Can young children use enzymes?
Yes. So when do we? I do not recommend using enzymes for children who are breastfeeding because there are a lot of good proteins and antibodies in breast milk that we don't want the enzymes to break down. Mom can take enzymes though; um, they help her get nutrition from the food she eats, so she can keep producing milk. Certain foods, when she takes enzymes, can be prevented from getting into the milk, and you're also preventing if she's eating gluten or casein, you can keep those peptides from getting into breast milk by taking the enzymes. But if kids once kids are starting on solid foods, then you can consider giving them enzymes if it's necessary. If their digestion seems okay, then uh, don't worry about it. But once they start eating solid foods, then it's okay to give them.
Okay. What kinds of tests are available to show food intolerance or malabsorption? I
Mm,
had my son tested for allergies and nothing showed except he is allergic to dust.
okay. Yeah, there's the food allergy testing is, and sometimes it's sometimes they're so sensitive they show that, oh, your kid's allergic to everything, but yet your kid's been eating those foods without any problems. So usually it's on a scale of 0 to 5. If it's 3 or above, then I say, yeah, then it's probably something you should avoid or use the enzymes to help prevent future intolerances from developing. But as far as malabsorption, it's hard to for definitive tests. You just kind of have to go by your what you see in your child. Um, Sometimes what comes through the bowel movements, a lot of undigested food, that can be an indication that enzymes may be helpful. But I don't know. That's something you might discuss with your doctor. But really, it's more of a just use your mom sense to figure those out. If you're pretty sure that there's, if the kid's needs to gain weight, if he's thin, skinny, um, thin hair, or dry skin, then those all may be signs that he may not be absorbing the foods that he's eating.
What are the options when there is a severe deficiency of enzymes to digest sugar, sucrose?
Um, Good question. Converting sucrose to glucose. Sometimes a sucrase enzyme can do that, or invertase, but really those sugars convert not just to glucose but to other sugars as well. So, not totally sure on that question, but most enzymes that are high in carbohydrates would be beneficial. But you get the most benefit through the amylase and glucoamylase enzymes. Glucoamylase, another enzyme that may be helpful, or you see mentioned on some enzymes, is maltase, but maltase is also known as glucoamylase. So if you see glucoamylase listed, then that also means that maltase is there too. But that doesn't mean it's breaking down maltose. It means it's breaking down malt diastase, which is actually starch. So it works in conjunction with amylase to break down large starch groups. But yeah, conversion of sucrose is a little more difficult. Luckily, I think that's an area where the probiotics can help. So probiotics produce a whole different set of enzymes. So they may be helpful in that area. It's just finding the right species that will work in a particular person's gut.
Why not just use protease 4.5 and 6.0 and not the DPP4?
Well, the thing is, if you're using those enzymes, the DPP4 is in there anyway. The DPP4 we found it. It's there basically as a contaminant, or we don't like to use the word contaminant. We just use the word or the phrase side activity, meaning it was there all the time. We just didn't know it till we knew what to look for. So if you're using protease 4.5 and protease 6.0s, yeah, the DP4 is going to be there anyway. So that's DPP4 is not a standardized enzyme. It's not in the FCC or the Food Chemical Codex list, which means they don't have a standardized procedure for assaying it. We did develop a way to test it, so we know it's there. But the the Bible of enzyme laboratory work hasn't yet accepted it or included it in its the Food Chemical Codex, and there's no guarantee that they will. So that's why you just see it listed, but you don't. It's it's a little complex, but yeah, if you're using protease 4.5, protease 6.0, it's going to be there regardless, even if it's not listed on the label.
I think that wraps it up for today. And if our recording went well, we will post the webinar on our site within a few days, and you will receive an email with the link to the recording. If we didn't get to your question today, call or email us. We'd be happy to help you anytime. Thanks everyone for attending.